In scene 5, it's positioned so that Tim and Bonnie are at the same level. Bonnie is facing slightly out towards the rest of the audience, and then Tim is facing towards her. We decided this to kind of show the power between the two, but we decided that Bonnie is Tim's boss. This is never specified in the script or anywhere we could find, but we thought this would work best in the way that Bonnie talks to Tim and how Tim reacts to what Bonnie is saying. At the start of the scene, it's Bonnie kind of asking Tim how his day went, kind of. It says, are you happy with everything? And are you happy that everything that could be done was done? This is her sort of like explaining what she means, as Tim says what after, are you happy with everything? And she takes it as in he doesn't understand what she's asking, but I don't think that's what Tim actually means. What I think Tim means is like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Sort of thing. It comes in very much at the beginning of when he first sees her. But the way Bonnie is, she takes it to mean that he doesn't understand what she's saying, not that that he's questioning specifically what she is talking about, not something else. This miscommunication is also shown slightly further down in the first page when Bonnie says, you look really tired. This is a very obvious thing to say to someone and not something you would typically say. We thought that she has quite a few lines like this, and we thought that it was possibly because she may have autistic traits or is on the autism spectrum. It's never specified anywhere that she is, but we thought that she was just because the way she was acting, and that she does very simplistic answers and never really seems to have any emotions towards people or understands what people are feeling. This is also reflected when she starts saying, yes, I know that, yes, yes, I know. As in, because Tim is trying to say, like, you shouldn't be here, it's my birthday. And Bonnie's just like, yes, I know it's your birthday, okay, fine, what about it? Because she doesn't understand what Tim is actually trying to say with that and the subtext that he has within it. Bonnie then has a line saying that you're saying my name a lot. This could possibly reflect her social skills and that she's been taught that it's weird to say someone's name a lot. So she picks it out and is like, oh, this is a weird thing, why are you doing this? But it could also reflect that Emma and Daisy have similar lines to this, as their names constantly get said by their significant other. So for Bonnie, I think it's more about her social skills than reflecting to Emma and Daisy. But then again, this is only the third scene that Bonnie has been in, and none of them are connected just yet, Carol, Anna and Bonnie. So I think this is one of the first hints that Bonnie is connected to the other two, even though the audience hasn't seen Emma or Daisy yet. When they do, it's something in the back of their mind that could relate them to this. Bonnie often changes the subject, possibly because she's trying to prolong the question that she ultimately is kind of there to ask Tim. Because even though she contradicts this later on, I think she is there to ask this question more than anything. So yeah, saying things like, you're saying my name a lot, and then when Tim's saying, oh, do you want an apology, she just goes on to say, you seemed very upset. This is definitely her way of subject changing, partially to get off track of having to ask the question, but also saying you seem particularly upset gets her very much on track to asking the question, even though she may not want to. When Tim says a little girl died, Bonnie doesn't react to this at all. And then Tim goes on to say, a little girl died on my table. Of course I was upset. Bonnie doesn't seem like she would think much towards this. It's more of a fact towards her because of the way she was acting in the earlier parts of the scene. It seems very much as if she would just stand there being like, okay, what's your point, rather than having any emotions. During this scene, when we tried to block it, and the run-throughs that we've had of it since, I've tried to take it in different ways. So I started off thinking, okay, so she might react a little bit, so she might feel a little bit guilty. So when Tim says a little girl died, she'd be like, in her head, she'd be, okay, sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up at all. I shouldn't be here. In another one, I tried very much to be kind of upset and comforting, like reaching my arm out, trying to comfort him. And then after that, it sort of, once I knew the character of Bonnie more, it seemed a lot more like Bonnie to just stand there waiting until he asks her a question or she has any reason to respond. This is just because later on it very much solidifies that she has social problems. Not necessarily that she is autistic, just because the symptoms that she shows are very much on the male version of autism symptoms, but that she's not completely socially developed. This could be because she didn't have a mother to grow up with, and then as she finds out about her mother and grandmother, it could very much affect how she is within friends and family. And then if her friends find out, they would probably not associate as much with her. Therefore, she wouldn't have as much experience with other people as maybe other people of her age might have. Bonnie then says, I wondered if you felt anything had gone wrong. This seems very obvious to Tim why she's saying that, and he thinks he knows what she's talking about. But I think Bonnie means something different, because he thinks that it's because his glasses fell inside the little girl when he was operating surgery. But I think Bonnie means something completely different, like why the little girl might have died. It never specifies what she may mean, but it's quite obvious in their interaction following that she doesn't mean that, because she says that his glasses fell inside her, and then when he says that's not why she died, she knows that that's not why she died, but she wants to know why she may have died, I guess. She doesn't understand how to convey what she means properly to Tim to make him understand. So saying obviously not when Tim says that it wasn't the glasses that killed her is possibly her way of comforting Tim, saying, okay, I know it wasn't your glasses. But then she also seems to want to know why the girl might have died. But I think her way of trying to comfort Tim is very much not a way that most people would try and comfort other people. Most people would try and skirt around it and make them feel better, whereas Bonnie just goes straight in for it and says, okay, you didn't do anything wrong about that part, but what might have gone wrong? What could you change for the future? Because I think her way of saying, did you feel anything had gone wrong, is her way of saying, okay, don't do it in the future, and then other people may not die, and then you may not have as much of, you may not have to go through this feeling again. So the next two lines is like, I'm not saying it was, I didn't say they had, it's kind of showing that she doesn't understand subtext and takes things at face value. This then solidifies the fact that we already know that Bonnie has social problems, and this just helps the audience know that that is definitely what is going on right now. And then because they have no idea about Bonnie's past at the moment, it's getting them to question why she might be like this, because they may think that there must be a reason, like she can't have just been born like it, there must be a reason why she has bad social skills. So it could be them starting to link up the 3 generations. Yeah. So Bonnie then goes on to say, "You didn't save her." That is stating the obvious, and she doesn't mean any harm towards Tim. She's just saying, like, well, you didn't save her, so what? Like, if you didn't save her, then you must have killed her in a way. As Tim's line before was that he didn't kill her. During the blocking of this scene and the following run-throughs, I try to explore that line as well, because it could be very much like an angry thing. Oh, well, you didn't save her, then you must have killed her, sort of thing. But it could also be quite comforting in a way, saying like, oh, but you didn't save her, so like you. It could also be a humorous thing, making it more of a joke, like they're competing to like get the power. So in that situation, it would be Tim saying, "Oh, but I didn't kill her," and then Bonnie being, "Well, you didn't save her, now did you?" As sort of like a humorous thing. But I think I ended up between being quite emotionless with it and slightly humorous. I thought this worked best as it made Bonnie seem less like the bad guy in this situation, because she is the main character. She is one of the main characters, and you don't want to put the audience against her. But then again, you don't want to make her seem so emotionless that she'd make a joke out of a girl dying. So making it flat with very little emotion, with the slightest amount of humour in that, I think was the best option to make the audience on her side, but also not make her seem completely emotionless and robotic. She then says, like, no, obviously not. It's the way she says it isn't a defensive way of replying. It's more just, it's her way of normally replying, just saying, "Oh no, I didn't." Like, it's if someone just asked you a normal question, you say no, that's how she would react to these sort of questions and these sort of statements. However, on the obviously not, it would be slightly different, because in that situation it was Tim accusing her of following him from the hospital. And I think even though the lack of social skills Bonnie may have, she recognises that this is not something that normal people do. So obviously she's going to fight against it a bit more and say obviously not quite harshly. So on Bonnie's line, "You invited me," I think there'll be a slight awkwardness to it, as with everything that happened before, they've gotten into an argument on his birthday. And then it's Bonnie admitting that she's not here to talk about the little girl, that Tim actually invited her. So I think even though she may not understand that she might have upset him as much as she did, she'd still recognise that she did something wrong. So would be slightly awkward about it and just not quite want to say it as freely as she may normally do. However, I couldn't make that too obvious, so I couldn't stammer over it or make it seem very obvious that she didn't want to say it, as that would just seem very out of character for what Bonnie would do. So I had to try and walk the very thin line between being awkward in a Bonnie way and being awkward in a normal way, which was very hard to try and accomplish, but I think I did it in the end. I brought wine was one line that I got directed on quite a lot in the beginning, because originally I did it with a slightly higher pitch towards the end. So like I brought wine quite happily, and trying to get him on her side again. But I got told repeatedly to like bring it down, make it all flat throughout the whole thing, which eventually I managed to do, but it took a while just because it felt very natural to go up at the end. Whereas Bonnie might not go up at the end, she might stay flat as it's just a statement. The happy birthday after that, normally it might seem quite spiteful, as he did not exactly kill, but he caused the death of a little girl earlier. So some people might be quite spiteful, being like, oh, well, you killed a girl, like, why should you deserve a birthday? Whereas she's just quite genuine about it, being like, happy birthday, I hope you have a happy birthday, even though he might not be able to have one because of what happened earlier in the day. The Bonnie's line, "know well," I said differently to the script. I made it more of like an awkward thing, like, "no, well," as if she's going to carry on. Whereas in the script, there are 2 full stops after it, so very much be 2 singular words that are connected, but they both have emphasis and they could both work on their own. Whereas I made them link together a lot more, and as if it's someone trying to be awkward, being like, well, I'm sorry I didn't come. I did this because I felt like if I did it too robotically and too much like the script is written, then the audience may not be on Bonnie's side at all, because they have no way of relating to her or connecting to her. So making her seem slightly more human than what was written seemed like the right thing to do. She then says, "you seemed very upset." This is repeated from earlier in the scene. There were 2 options between this line. There was either the quite obvious, like, okay, you seemed very upset, like, this is where I came, or caring as in, like, I came because you seemed upset, I wanted to comfort you. I went for more on the caring side, just to let the audience relate a bit more to her and not make her seem completely evil or emotionless. But then also I couldn't make her completely caring because then she wouldn't be Bonnie. Again, I had to walk the line between the 2 and try and figure out a way that Bonnie would say it, but also a way that the audience would relate to her. She was 8, is what Bonnie says, correcting Tim on the little girl's age. She does this more of a factual thing, and maybe slightly disapproving because Tim should have known how old the girl was. And maybe this was also Bonnie picking up on why Tim went wrong in the surgery. So I think I never realised that it could have been her disapproving that Tim should have known her age. I went for more like very factual, giving him the facts and correcting him rather than being disapproving. However, I think that could have worked better, because if I made her look disapproving at that point, the audience could be very much against her, as not many people would disapprove of someone that just had to go through what he went through. So I think not realising that it could have been disapproving is possibly the better option than realising it and playing that out too much. So she was just very small. The way I say it, I put emphasis on very, as in saying like, oh well, maybe that's why you thought she was younger than what she is. But I'm not sure if you actually needed that as much, because the way that Bonnie speaks is very much flat. There's not much difference in tone between her lines, except for when she either gets angry or or someone's making her feel something. So I think I possibly could have gotten rid of that and just made it quite flat, and then that would also make her slightly more human to the audience, because it's less of her correcting Tim and making him seem quite inferior towards her, and more that he just made a mistake. Tim then goes on to start shouting at Bonnie. I had to try and think about how Bonnie might react to this, because as she may not have the best emotion range, she might not know how to react to him shouting. So she could either be affected like a normal person would and either try and apologise or like cower away slightly, or in a lot more Bonnie way, she could just stand there taking it, not really realising what she's done. However, she then says Tim, and the way I've done it was slightly more caring, like reaching out to him, trying to stop him from going. So I think with the shouting, because of that line, I had to make it slightly cowering away, but and knowing what she's done to affect him, because otherwise that line would then be completely out of sync with how she acted before, and it just wouldn't make sense to the audience. Bonnie then has a 2-page gap when Tim leaves and before the child comes in. I had to try and think about what I'd do in that gap, and we initially got told that we'd just replay the action in our head, or Bonnie would replay the action in her head, and try and think about how she may just stand there, whether she'd just stand there and stare out towards the audience or stand there looking around, and how her face might be. I think in the end I chose to stand there, looking around a little bit and every so often making it seem as if she is like going through what just happened and how it could have affected him, and actually thinking about what she said. Because I think the way Bonnie works is that she represses the emotions very much so she doesn't have to think about them. But then afterwards, when she has time to think, they all cascade down on her and they very much take control of her in a way that she doesn't want them to. This is later reflected in the later scenes and how sometimes she may react to what other people are saying after she's had some time to think about it, such as scene 10 when she gets very emotional, and scene 15 when in the script it says that she starts crying. So I had to try and work that into that gap, and make it seem as if she does have emotions, she just represses them until she actually has to think about them and has time to think about them. However, when the child comes in, she completely gets taken out of it and she gets taken back into the reality and what's going on around her. The way Bonnie reacts to the child is very simplistic, and she just says 1 or 2 words. And when the child asks who she is, she just says Bonnie, I'm Bonnie. Not really explaining anything, just stating the facts as if her going into like a reverie of what just happened and replaying it all in her head. When she eventually got brought back, she was reduced to much less than what she was before she went into it. So she pushes the emotions even deeper down than they were before. Her interaction with the child is very unusual towards a child as well. We decided that the child was about 14, I think it was, around then, so 13 to 15ish. And the child has one line that says, "This is my 4th WKD." Bonnie's just like, okay, that's fine, I don't see any problem with it, sort of thing. And then when the child just says, "I'm considering taking some MDMA," Bonnie just says, okay, as if she doesn't really care. She's not really thinking about what the child is saying or paying attention to her at all. And then Bonnie just goes on to say, "No, I don't really care about the MDMA, but you probably shouldn't because it's a really bad idea." And then almost as an afterthought, she says that the child is quite little. As in, she's going very much from a factual point of view, being like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do it as it's a bad idea. You're quite little. As if that she didn't even realise that the child was a child, possibly, that she can't tell the difference or chooses not to tell the difference between children and adults. So how she responds to the child is possibly the best way in which she could, because her simplistic answers make the child realise that they're not going to get any attention from her. So it makes them just walk off as soon as they can, and once they go back to the party, because what they've done is come out here to get the attention. And once they realise that they're not going to get it, they just realise that this isn't going to happen and walk back inside. Then Bonnie then has a gap of around 7 pages, in which the child is gone and Tim hasn't yet come back. So during this gap I had to try and explore what to do, as it is a very long gap and it would look very weird if Bonnie was just stood there still staring, emotionless completely. So initially, for the first page or two of the gap, it was more of a thing of Bonnie replaying the interaction with the child and finding it quite funny, because as I think Bonnie works, is she never realises what people are saying during the interaction, but after it she does. And then she realised that it is actually quite a funny interaction that just went on. So that's what I decided to do for the first few pages. And then after that, it became more of a thing of just standing there looking around, because she's meant to be on the very front of their front garden, looking onto a street directly in front of her. So I went through the motions of being like, okay, what if this person walked past? What would she do? And then chose the best sort of people. So a dog walker I chose as one of them. It'd be a thing like looking at the person, then looking at the dog, paying more attention to the dog, because I think she relates more to animals than she does people, because they also can't communicate what they're thinking. And then possibly smiling when she sees the dog, looking at a bush just in front of her within the garden that is later referred to, and that sort of thing. So that took up the rest of the gap in which she doesn't have anything to do. And I thought it worked quite well, because it seemed quite a Bonnie thing to do, to just stand there and take in the surroundings and just people watch, I guess. So when Tim comes back in, he seems quite apologetic, because I think he does know how Bonnie is, and that he kind of forgot about it in the first interaction. And after he's been inside, he's calmed down a little bit and realised what Bonnie might have meant with the things that she said, and then come back in with a completely different mindset. Bonnie then says sellotape, as if I had to try and think about whether she meant to explain it or not, because she could have just said sellotape, assumed that Tim would understand, and that would be it. And there is, in the script, a full stop after it. So I think it is meant to be that she just says that, and that is it, and she assumes that Tim will understand exactly what she means. But to try and convey this, I had to think about the way she would say it. So it can't be more of a question. It has to be very factual, but it also has to convey exactly what she means within that one word. So it was very difficult to try and figure out how to say it. She then goes on to say exactly what she means by it, and she just keeps going with it. So I think this is the first time she's actually let herself speak more than just 1 or 2 words. And because of that, it turns into quite a long sentence that she does say. I also had to think about the tone and emotions during it, because there's one line that says she was always going to die. I had to think that, how would she say that? Would she say it with emotions and with emphasis, or would she just say it like she was always going to die, you didn't make a mistake? Like, very factual, being very much devoid of emotions, even though it's quite an emotional thing what she's saying, because she's apologizing in a way to Tim about what she said before. So I had to try and develop it as I went and think, and I recorded a few different versions of it to try and figure out which one works best and which one is the best for the audience, which is most real to Bonnie, and have a compromise in between. There was also a line that says, into her actual fucking insides. This is the first time she's sworn in the whole scene, so I think it's the only time she swears in the whole scene. So it had to be very much, I had to think about that line a lot, because there must have been a reason that she swore, but then also she doesn't seem that angry at all. I think it's more of her joking around, in a way. It's her version of a joke that, while other people may not understand, she does, and she thinks it's funny. Therefore, I would have to too, and I'd have to understand what would be going through her head at that point. Tim then says, was that an apology? That was a question in my head too when I was reading it at first, but I think afterward, now I think I realise that it is an apology, and it's her way of trying to say I'm sorry, but I don't think she's capable of saying those words specifically. So I think it is just her way of apologising, as she knows no other way to do it. Tim then asks her if she's tired, and she responds in a very unusual way, saying that she doesn't know if she is tired. This is almost the first weakness that she's showing of her, and it's incredibly unusual, and not many people, like, people would know if they're tired or not, and yet she doesn't. So I think I very much had to explore those 3 lines and try and think about what she's actually thinking and how that actually works for her, and whether she does actually know, whether she's not and she's just covering it up. But I think it's definitely feeling tired, but everything that she knows about her past is affecting her, and therefore she doesn't feel like loved enough to feel tired, maybe, or something along those lines, that she knows she is, but she doesn't possibly know exactly what it feels like to be, as it's never been explained to her.